I'm Dark Veil, and today we uncover the grim truth. Once upon a time is still happening. There is a mirror in a farmhouse in Iceland that has been recording continuously for 11 years. In that entire time, the woman in the reflection has blinked twice. The 7 people who live in the farmhouse will not enter the room where it hangs. They will only stand outside the door, close enough to hear it humming like something counting. My name is Neve Aldric. I'm an investigative journalist. 3 months ago, I received a USB drive in the mail with no return address. On it were 847 gigabytes of internal documents from a biotech company called AURIS. I should have gone to the police. I went to Iceland instead. Before we get to the farmhouse, we need to talk about AURIS. You've probably seen their ads. Even if you don't recognize the name, they run in the margins of luxury travel sites and on the back pages of the kind of magazines that cost $20 and smell like someone spilled a department store on them. The ads don't say much, just an image, usually a face, and underneath it a single line. Symmetry is the language of health. AURIS Biotech was founded in 2003 by Heloise Varn, a computational biologist who had spent the previous decade at 3 different universities publishing research on what she called bilateral coherence, which is an extremely expensive way of saying facial symmetry. Varn's thesis, which she spent roughly 40 years trying to prove, was that perfect bilateral symmetry in a human face was not merely aesthetically pleasing, it was a biological signal, a marker of what she called bilateral coherence, which is an extremely expensive way of saying facial symmetry. Varn's thesis, which she spent roughly 40 years trying to prove, was that perfect bilateral symmetry in a human face was not merely aesthetically pleasing, it was a biological signal, a marker of what she called optimized cellular homeostasis, meaning the body's ability to maintain itself without degradation. Symmetry, according to Varn, was not beauty. It was immunity. It was longevity. It was, if her models were correct, something very close to the body simply refusing to get old. She was considered eccentric at best and a crank at worst by the scientific establishment for most of her career. Then AURIS went public in 2011 and raised $400 million in its first week because it turns out that when you tell wealthy people you can measure their proximity to mortality, they will pay almost anything to hear the number. The product was called the Symmetry Index. You came into an AURIS clinic, you sat in front of a proprietary mirrored surface embedded with what the company called harmonic imaging sensors. The mirror mapped your face in 312 measurement points. It compared those points to a baseline of what Varn's models identified as the coherence ceiling, the theoretical maximum of bilateral symmetry achievable in a living human face. It gave you a score. It told you where you fell short. Then it sold you on a treatment program to close the gap. The treatments were expensive. The waiting lists were long. The clients were, to a person, the kind of people who had stopped being surprised by how much things cost. None of that is the story. The story is what AURIS was doing in the basement of their research division while the clinics were running upstairs. But that wasn't the discovery that made half the research staff quit within a month. The USB drive contained, among other things, 11 years of internal memos, trial documentation, and HR records. It also contained a photograph. The photograph was dated 2009, 2 years before AURIS went public, and it showed a young woman seated in front of one of the early symmetry index mirrors. She had dark hair and pale skin, and the kind of face that makes you feel slightly unsettled without being able to say why. Not because anything is wrong with it, because nothing is. Every proportion lands exactly where it should. Every line resolves correctly. Her symmetry index score, written in the margin of the photograph in blue ink, was 99.7. The theoretical maximum, according to Varn's own models, was 100. The AURIS internal designation for this woman was Subject 1. The research staff, according to the memos, called her something else. They called her the White. Not to her face, or maybe to her face. The memos don't specify. What the memos do specify is that Subject 1 was enrolled in a longitudinal study beginning in October 2009 with her full informed consent to test what AURIS called coherence maintenance protocols, which, when you strip away the language, means they were trying to figure out how she stayed that way, what she ate, how she slept, what her cells were doing that no one else's cells seemed to be doing. The study was supposed to run for 2 years. It ran for 4, at which point AURIS quietly halted all documentation. The last official entry in Subject 1's file is dated March 2013. It reads, "Protocol suspended. Outcome inconclusive. Subject relocated per voluntary withdrawal agreement." There are 7 signatures at the bottom of that document. I recognized one of them because it was also on the lease for a farmhouse in Iceland. Getting to Havita Valley is not convenient. This is, I suspect, intentional. You fly into Reykjavik, rent a car with the kind of drivetrain that can handle roads that are more of a suggestion than an infrastructure commitment, and drive 3 hours northeast into a valley that seems to have been specifically designed to make you feel like you've made a series of increasingly questionable life choices. The last 30 minutes are unpaved. The sky does this thing where it can't decide if it's dusk or dawn, and in February, it's sometimes both at once. The farmhouse is low and white and surrounded by nothing. I knocked on the door. A man opened it, late 40s, maybe 50, with the specific kind of tiredness that comes not from lack of sleep, but from prolonged proximity to something unresolvable. He looked at me for a long moment. "You're the journalist," he said. "You knew I was coming?" "Someone sent a message 3 days ago, said a journalist had a drive and would be coming north." He stepped back from the door. "We've been expecting you, or someone like you." His name was Tor Grau. He had been a biometrics researcher at AURIS from 2010 to 2013, so had 6 of the other people living in the farmhouse. All 7 of them had signed that last document in Subject 1's file. All 7 of them had left AURIS within the same month in 2013, and all 7 of them had, within the following year, ended up here. Not together at first, one by one, as if the valley had a gravity. I asked Tor why. He poured 2 cups of coffee, which I took as a good sign, sat down across from me, and said, "Because we need to be somewhere the mirrors don't follow." Then he looked at his coffee for a while. "That's not entirely true," he said. "We brought one with us. We didn't know it was still running." Here is what AURIS told their clients the symmetry index mirrors did: measure, map, score. Here is what the mirrors actually did according to the technical documentation on the drive. The harmonic imaging sensors ran continuously, not just during appointments, all day, in the walls of the clinics, behind the glass in the consultation rooms, embedded in the mirrors that hung in every AURIS-affiliated space. They were capturing longitudinal data on every face that passed within range, building what the internal documentation called a coherence archive, mapping the rate at which human faces deviated from baseline symmetry over time, meaning, in plain language, mapping how people aged, how fast, where first, what the precursor signals were. Clients never consented to this. Subjects of the longitudinal studies did, but the technical briefing they were given described the sensors as measuring static symmetry. Nobody mentioned the continuous recording. Nobody mentioned the archive. The archive was, by 2013, the largest longitudinal face biometric dataset in the world. Varn had been building a library of human aging, and Subject 1 wasn't in it, because Subject 1, across 4 years of continuous biometric monitoring, had not produced a single data point of deviation. Not one. 0 change, 0 deviation, 0 aging. A face that had, according to every measurement the mirrors could take, simply stopped. I asked Tor what Varn's reaction was when she saw the data. He wrapped both hands around his coffee cup. "She cried," he said. "The first time she saw it, she just cried. We thought it was joy. We thought she was overwhelmed by the confirmation of everything she'd worked for." He paused. "It wasn't joy. What was it?" "Grief," he said. "She was looking at a woman whose face was the proof of everything Vaughn had theorized. The coherence ceiling wasn't theoretical. It existed. It was real. It was achievable." He set down the cup of coffee, and it wasn't her. After 40 years of work, the answer walked into her clinic and sat down in front of her mirror, and it wasn't her. I said, "What happened to Subject 1? He didn't answer right away. Somewhere deeper in the house, something hummed, low, barely there, like something counting. In the original story, the queen sends a huntsman to kill the girl who is more beautiful than she is. AURIS did something more modern. They sent compliance. His name, according to the visitor log at the nearest village, was Peter Sig. He arrived in January 2013, 2 months before the final document was signed. He stayed for 4 days. The memos described his visit as a voluntary withdrawal facilitation, which is corporate language for we were extracting our asset before anyone asks too many questions. Subject 1 left the AURIS campus in a company car. After that, the documentation ends, except for one thing. Buried in the drive, in a subfolder that had been partially overwritten but not fully deleted, was an intake form from a private medical facility in Oslo, dated April 2013, 1 month after the withdrawal. The patient's name was redacted. The admitting physician's notes were not. Patient presents in metabolic stasis, vitals suppressed but stable, no evidence of external trauma. Biochemical panel consistent with advanced exposure to compound AURIS-7, proprietary sedative agent developed for trial protocols. Patient is unresponsive. Prognosis unclear. Notable: patient does not appear to be aging. Notable: patient is extremely beautiful. The attending physician had added one more line beneath the report. It had been underlined twice. Notable: patient does not appear to sleep. We had called the number on the intake form 3 times. No one answers. I read those notes aloud to Tor. He was quiet for a long time. "We didn't know about Oslo," he said. "We thought the withdrawal was clean. We thought she left and went somewhere and lived her life." He pressed his fingers against his eyes. "We signed the document. We all signed it. We told ourselves it was a formality." "Did you know about AURIS-7? A long silence. "We developed it," he said. "All of us. It was for the trials, a metabolic suppressant. We were trying to test whether you could temporarily slow cellular degradation. It was never supposed to be used on a person outside of controlled conditions." His voice had dropped to something barely above a whisper. "It was never supposed to be used the way the Oslo notes describe." I asked, "Why did you all come here, to this valley? I mean, really?" He stood up, walked to the hallway door, and stopped. "Come with me," he said. "There's something you need to hear first, so that when you see it, you don't just run." The hallway smelled like cold stone and something faintly chemical, not unpleasant, just present. The kind of smell a room develops when it has been sealed for a long time and then briefly opened and sealed again. The other 6 researchers had gathered quietly behind us. I hadn't heard them come. They stood in the hallway, not pushing forward and not speaking. Tor stopped at the door. Plain wood, old hinges. He put his hand on the frame, but didn't touch the handle. "We brought it because we thought we might need it," he said, "for documentation, evidence, if things ever came to a legal question." He laughed, but it was the wrong shape for a laugh. "We didn't realize it was still powered. The sensor arrays run on a charge cycle that we had no idea could last this long. We should have checked. We should have dismantled it. What is it?" "One of the clinic mirrors, original sensor hardware intact." He finally looked at me. We discovered it was still running about a year after we arrived. We checked the archive log. It had been recording continuously since we first powered it on in 2009. Recording what? You're out here in the middle of nowhere. Exactly, he said, the 7 of us and one other face. He waited. There are 7 of you? Yes. He waited again. That's the problem. I felt the cold from under the door before he opened it. The archive shows 8 faces, he said. It has since 2009. We have checked every room, every window angle, every possible explanation for a false positive in the data. He opened the door. The mirror was large, floor to ceiling, framed in brushed steel, characteristic of early AURIS hardware. The sensor array on its surface gave it a faint iridescent quality in the dim light, like oil on still water. My reflection looked back at me, and beside it, visible in the mirror's peripheral range, just at the edge of where the sensors would capture, was something else. Not a full figure, not clearly defined, more like the memory of a shape, the impression of a face that was, even in its indistinct, sensor-logged form, perfectly proportioned. We've reviewed the archive 1,000 times, Tor said behind me. There's something else. What? Every few weeks, the shape moves 1 pixel closer to the center. He let that sit for a moment. We have tried to find the source of that data point. We've checked the farmhouse room by room. We've checked the grounds. And there's nothing there, physically. No one, no source for the reflection. He paused, but the symmetry index score on that data point is 99.7. The humming was louder in here, low, continuous, and patient. 11 years of patience. I looked at the mirror. The shape at the edge looked back. She's not in Oslo anymore, said Tor quietly. We checked. The facility closed in 2015. Patient records transferred to a third party we cannot identify. His voice was very steady, in the way that voices get when steadiness is the only option left. We don't know where she is. We don't know what the compound did to her. We don't know what she has become in 11 years of that stasis. I could not look away from the shape in the mirror. But something does, he said. The mirror knows. It's been tracking her this whole time. Whatever she is now, wherever she is, the sensors are still reading her. How is that possible? The range on these sensors is what, a few meters? Tor said nothing. One of the researchers behind me, a woman, said very softly, that was the original spec. I stayed at the farmhouse for 9 days. On the 7th day, a package arrived. This is the part of the story I have gone back and forth about including because it sounds unlikely, but I was there. 7 other people were there, and the delivery log from the village courier service confirms a package was delivered to the farmhouse on that date, sent from a mail forwarding address in Geneva that traces back, eventually, to an AURIS subsidiary that was supposed to have been dissolved in 2018. The package contained 7 small jars of what appeared to be apple preserves, sealed with wax. No note. The 8th jar was different. The wax was a different color, and the seal was almost unnervingly smooth, as if applied by something that did not rush, did not hesitate, and didn't shake. Tucked beneath it, in the packaging, was a small card with nothing on it but a symmetry index score, 99.7. We did not eat the preserves. We drove the jars down to a lab in Reykjavik ourselves. The lab found in the 8th jar, with the distinct wax seal, trace concentrations of a compound they couldn't immediately identify. They sent a sample to a colleague in Oslo. The colleague called back inside 4 hours. The compound was AURIS-7, a modified version, refined, more stable than the original formula, the kind of refinement that takes years of continued development. Someone had been working on it. Still. I'm going to be honest with you because I think you deserve honesty more than you deserve a tidy ending. I do not know where Subject 1 is. I do not know what 11 years of AURIS-7 exposure does to a human body, or to a human face, or to whatever Subject 1 is now, if the word human still fully applies. I don't know if Eloise Varn, who is 74 years old and still listed as a board consultant for 3 AURIS subsidiaries, sent the package herself, or had it sent, or whether she was also looking for something that has long since outgrown its origins. I do know that the mirror in the farmhouse is still running. I know that when I look at the footage from the night before I left, I can see my own reflection clearly in the archive. I can see the 7 researchers. I can see the ambient sensor bleed from the windows, the door frames, the low winter light. I can see the shape at the edge of the frame. It's closer to the center than it was on the first day I arrived. And I know one more thing, the thing that has kept me from sleeping properly since I drove back out of that valley and caught my flight home, sitting at a normal airport eating a completely average sandwich. And when I tried to remember what it felt like not to be afraid. The day after I left, Tor sent me the archive data from the previous 24 hours of recording. He sent it without comment. He didn't need to add one, because in the footage from the night I departed, there are 8 reflections, 7 of the researchers and 1 of me. And the moment I stepped into its range, the system created a second file, a new longitudinal study, mine. At the very edge of the frame, precisely where it had been for 11 years, is the shape. But in this footage, unlike every other frame in the entire archive, the shape is not simply present. It is looking at me specifically, and its symmetry index score has updated. It reads 100.0. The mirror is still recording, and somewhere out there, something perfect is getting closer. It is looking for whoever came to find it. It's looking for me. The mirror was never magic. It was honest. Please be sure to leave a comment, like, or subscribe. It helps my small channel, and I appreciate you all so much. Until the next Dark Veil tale, thank you.